The wandering Jew has been on the move since Abraham first left Haran, since famine forced Jacob's family to take shelter in Egypt, since Moses led us into the wilderness, since Joshua brought us into our homeland, since the destruction of our temple forced us to flee for our lives, since the prophet Isaiah followed us into the diaspora, since the expulsion from Spain and most other European countries, since pogroms drove us out of Russia, and since the final solution threatened to rid the world of the Jewish people. On May 13th, 1939, the German transatlantic liner St. Louis set sail from Hamburg, Germany, with almost 1,000 Jews fleeing the Third Reich. The Statue of Liberty beckoned them with the famous words of Jewish poet Emma Lazarus, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." In one of the most disgraceful moments in American history, the St. Louis was refused refuge in the United States, and everyone was sent back to Europe. Although England and other countries agreed to take some of the refugees, the Nazis killed twice as many of the St. Louis refugees as people in Paris were killed by terrorists this week. And now, predictably, political opportunists are politicizing the tragedy in Paris to promote their anti-immigration agendas and prevent the president's plan to shelter 10,000 Syrian refugees in America. Despite the fact that this pales in comparison with what our European allies are absorbing, in fact, it is 1% of what Lebanon is absorbing, it seems one refugee fleeing war-torn Syria is too many for some people. More than half the nation's governors have vowed not to accept any refugees from Syria, not that there's much that they can actually do to enforce that. And 2 days ago, the House passed a bill to block Syrian refugees from coming to America by a margin of 289 to 137, including 47 Democrats. Meanwhile, presidential candidate Chris Christie is expressing concerns about Syrian orphans under 5. Donald Trump is calling for American mosques to be closed, and he is saying Muslims in America should have to register with the United States, not unlike Jews were required to do under Nazi Germany. On the other side of the spectrum, a Jewish organization called Bend the Ark recently tweeted, registering everyone of a certain religion to a list. We've seen that. It doesn't end well. And the Religious Action Center of the Reform Movement published a press release saying, quote, "We cannot allow the violence wrought by ISIS and its allies to overshadow our values as Americans and as Reformed Jews. We call on members of Congress to oppose any effort to limit the acceptance of Syrian refugees. We must stand united with those who reject violence and divisiveness and instead support those who uphold healing, safety, and security for all." Meanwhile, I'm proud to say that 10 Jewish organizations, including the ADL, the CCAR, and the URJ, signed on to a letter appealing to senators and representatives to support the resettlement of Syrian refugees in the United States, stating, quote, "In 1939, our country turned away victims of persecution and violence. We implore you not to make that same mistake today." A powerful piece published this week in the Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz, columnist Chemi Shalev writes, "Jews who happen to agree for a host of ostensibly rational reasons that Syrian refugees should be denied entry will inevitably have to deal with cognitive dissonance. They will have to convince themselves that their position does not equate them with the bigots who refuse to allow their brothers and sisters of their own parents and grandparents to escape the Nazi inferno." While there's certainly plenty to say from the perspective of history, the St. Louis, and the Holocaust, it's also a rational alternative to the alarmist, anti-Muslim, anti-immigration hysteria that we're seeing across this nation of immigrants that we call America. For one thing, the United States is vastly more secure than Europe, where borders are more porous and identification isn't always required to cross from one border to the next. For another, we have a vast ocean between the United States and the terrorists wherever they may be hiding. Furthermore, the vetting process in the United States is far more stringent than it is in Europe. As Governor Daniel Malloy noted on All In with Chris Hayes earlier this week, since 2011, over 20,000 Syrian refugees have been considered by the United States, but only 7,000 of them were deemed acceptable, and only 2,000 actually made it to the United States. NPR reports that refugees are screened by several different agencies, including the UNHCR, the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, and Homeland Security, by officials trained to distinguish bona fide refugees from terrorists. Half of those who have been admitted to the United States are children, and only 2% are single males of combat age. As New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof observed this week, if the Islamic State wanted to dispatch a terrorist to America, it wouldn't ask a mole to apply for refugee status, but rather to apply for a student visa to study at, say, Indiana University. He says, hey, governors, are you going to keep out foreign university students? Goes on to note that if the United States were to suspend Syrian immigration, ISIS could far more easily send French or Belgian citizens, like the majority of this week's terrorists, here as tourists without a visa. And then, of course, there is the hypocrisy of those who claim that we need to protect America by keeping Muslims out, when they're doing nothing to protect America from the people who successfully use weapons to take the lives of tens of thousands of innocent American civilians right here in the United States each year. Of nearly 800,000 refugees who have taken shelter in the United States since 9/11, only 3 have ever been arrested for anything even remotely related to terrorism, and not one of them has ever actually put the United States in any real danger. In contrast, Governor Malloy reminds us that the United States expects to lose 30,000 Americans to non-terrorism-related gun violence in the United States this year. We don't even have a universal background check. People who are, in fact, on actual terrorism watch lists are legally permitted to purchase firearms in the United States, and more than 2,000 people on terrorist watch lists have actually purchased weapons legally in the United States since 2004. If you want to do something to protect America, something needs to be done about that. The hypocrisy is even worse than that. Consider this. In the worst foreign policy blunder in United States history, we took out a brutal dictator in Iraq, and we replaced him with something far more threatening to the people of Iraq, the people of America, and the people of the world. We may have lost 3,000 innocent civilians on 9/11, but we lost well over 4,000 United States servicemen in Iraq alone, not to mention the fact that we took the lives of well over 100,000 innocent Iraqi civilians in the process. Not only did the deposed Baathists take their military skills directly to ISIS, but we created a generation of people who see the United States as a country who indiscriminately murders Muslims without cause. We unleashed a Pandora's box in an already precarious Middle East. We drove Saddam Hussein's military to ISIS. We even provided the vast majority of the weapons in the ISIS arsenal. And when ISIS subjects the Syrian population to rape and torture and beheadings, the United States Congress does not even have the decency to support taking in a fraction of the innocent men, women, children, and elderly fleeing for their lives in the chaos that we sent to their home. As Jewish people living in America, our families all come from immigrants. There were no Jewish Native Americans that I know of. As Rabbi Jenny Rosen of Hayes recently wrote 2 weeks before the terror attacks, she said, "We know what it means to be strangers in a strange land. For the first time in Jewish history, our community is mobilizing in force to help refugees, not because they are Jewish, but because we are. Our Torah commands us, 'You shall not wrong nor oppress a stranger, ki gerim hayitem, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.'" That's Exodus 22:20. Leviticus expands the commandment, "The strangers who reside with you shall be to you as your citizens. V'ahavta lo kamocha, you shall love each one as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am Adonai your God." Leviticus 19:34. And the Talmud teaches, "B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lerot et atzmo kulohu yotzei mimitzrayim." In every generation, each person is obligated to see themselves as though they came forth from Egypt as slaves. Mishnah Psachim 10:5. In fact, every Passover we recite Halach Ma'anya. This is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Whoever is hungry, let them come and eat. Whoever is in need, let them come. I'm proud to see so many Jewish organizations joining the fight against xenophobia, Islamophobia, and the backlash against immigration. Post your opinions in the social media, write letters to the editor, contact your congresspeople and governors, be loud and proud about it. It's the Jewish thing to do. Shabbat Shalom.